All right, come on in. Welcome to the John Dennis Report for Thursday, May 27th, 2021. Happy to have you here. It's been an interesting couple of days here. Not a ton. I don't know. You may have a different feeling about it. I don't feel like there's a ton happening in the news right now. A couple of interesting things. I did an interview this morning. I'm going to make a note of this because I want to make a comment about it. I did an interview this morning in my courtyard with this Russian TV station. I think it's NTV. It's called. Let me look them up here. Yeah, NTV International. It's funny. They hooked up with me at one point, and they keep coming back. It's always a little awkward. I don't really know what to say other than it's just a little awkward. They've always sent really nice people over. They're always very lovely. I always feel a little weird about doing them because I feel like, maybe they're looking for a. They didn't ask me a ton about Russia, but I always feel like maybe they're asking me like from a pro-Russia point of view from me, and also they want me to put a negative spin on what's happening in America. So the questions feel a little skewed that way. It could also be that these are folks who don't speak English as their native language, so that could be a problem. But in any event, they came over in my courtyard. It was a lovely couple, a husband and wife, camera team. They're just reading off the questions for this. When we get the interview, I'll pass it on, and you'll see what my answers are. But one of the questions that came up, they asked me a lot of questions about BLM. And it's really awkward. I hate talking about this. I hate that there's so much discussion about race in this country because it's just not my thing. I just don't think in those terms. I never have. Grew up in a community that had lots of African Americans, Latinos, Puerto Ricans, Cubans. And I just don't. I just am not comfortable. I think most people aren't, and the fact that's being thrown into our culture is enforced on us is one of the reasons why people give in to the race baiters is because they just don't want to have that conversation. Anyway, there were questions about that, but one of the things came up is that there's going to be a meeting between Biden and Putin in Geneva. I think it's next month. Can you look that up, Mario? Let me know. So
Yes, I can.
there's a meeting coming up between the two of them, and I gotta say, I suspect they're going to use this part of the interview because the truth of the matter is, it's like putting a baby rabbit in a tight cage, in a wire mesh cage with a lion. This is ridiculous. Biden couldn't hold his own against a killer like Putin. Whether you think Putin is certainly a figurative killer, whether he's not, he's an actual one, is a literal one, is another issue. Yeah, June 16th, they're meeting in Geneva. He is sharp as a tack. Clearly knows how to win. Those were vicious circumstances coming out of the former Soviet Union, and he emerged at the top and has held power in really sort of like transparent ways. I say transparent. He's gone back and forth as the leader of the country and held positions that allowed him to sit on the sidelines for an election or two and then jumped back in. This guy is tough, and he's going to go up against Biden. Biden wouldn't have been able to hold his own against Putin in terms of protecting America's national interests when he was in his prime. But now Biden is clearly, a geriatric and cognitively impaired. And so I expect that, Putin will try and take advantage of the situation as much as possible, but I suspect not much will come out of it because it's like I don't know, it's like putting a professional MMA fighter in with a kid who's like in his first judo class or something when he was 7 years old. It's ridiculous. I just hope he doesn't, Biden doesn't commit to anything. Obviously, most of those negotiations are going to go on at lower levels before the theater meetings between Putin and Biden. I have to say that the Biden picks have been largely incompetent, and so that gives me some concern. You can say this about Trump. I think one criticism of Trump that's fair is that he made some bad personnel decisions, and I wouldn't even criticize Biden too much about making some bad personnel decisions. It just seems like all of his decisions are really, really bad and also staggeringly incompetent and arrogant. Whereas Trump's people were largely bad choices because they were committed to the deep state, committed to the Washington bureaucratic state, if you will, if you're not comfortable with that other term. And so there was conflict because Trump wanted them to do things that weren't in the interest of the bureaucratic state, and that created conflict. Whereas the Biden people seem to be largely incompetent. And so that gives me pause about that meeting in Geneva, just because if his underlings are as arrogant and incompetent as the people who have been on TV, like Tony Blinken, for example, who is clearly arrogant and clearly doesn't know what he's doing, then we will have some trouble. I'm also not as concerned about Russia as a threat to the United States because they've got an economy the size of Australia's. There's a bunch of these economies in the world that are at like $1.8 trillion or so. Yeah, and I think like Italy fits in there, and France is part of that, same range. I mean, Russia's a massive country land-wise. It has quite a few people. I think about 160 million. Can you look that up? And but it's not. It has nuclear weapons, so that's scary. But it's not a huge threat to us in any meaningful way. If we went to war directly with them, a conventional war, I mean, I think that we'd establish superiority fairly quickly. Doesn't make a ton of sense to do that, but I'm just saying I don't see them on the global scene as the bigger problem. Is a big problem. The bigger problem, of course, is China, and Russia's population has declined. It's 146 million people. Can you look up the GDP of Russia and the GDP of California?
Yes.
Thanks. So I guess that California's GDP might be the size of Russia. So I'm not that concerned. China, on the other hand, is a bigger concern. It's a funny thing. I'm always reluctant to criticize China, not because of any consequences, because I'm not worried about that, but only because I'm rooting for China. I really wish they wouldn't be the way they are. But I also understand too that there's a long history of hierarchical structure in their society, and it's just going to lead us to a lot of conflict with them, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Anyway, so just sort of buttoning down this interview with Russian TV. June 16th, Biden and Putin meet, and hopefully nothing of substance is going to come up, because I'm sure Biden would get his lunch eaten and would wonder what happened. The only other concern, too, that I mentioned in this interview is that, every interaction that Biden has with Russia is always going to be shadowed and is going to have the specter of Ukraine sitting over it. And he's going to be judged in that regard on every single thing that he does. His interference with the Ukrainian prosecutor, his son's work on the Ukrainian board of the energy company. So that's always going to sit there. It doesn't bode well, I think, for any of us. So anyway, we'll see how that plays out. Okay, moving on. Just want to make a couple of. One other thing I did want to mention. Actually, let's move on. Let's move on to Tony Fauci. I mean, a lot of people were on him early, and they'll say, "Oh, Russia's 4.3 and California's 3 trillion." I'm going back to my 1990s numbers when I'm saying 1.8. Um, yeah, so I mean, like it's like I said, Russia's economy is the size of Australia's. Not much bigger than California's. A bit bigger, but not a ton bigger. About 25% bigger than California's. So actually, maybe about 33%. But whatever the case is, they're not a big concern. China, on the other hand, is a much bigger concern in terms of individual liberty for Americans over time. Going back to Tony Fauci, so I mean, he's been in the news, quite a bit. Rand Paul, of course, it's a funny thing because Fauci, when he deals with Rand Paul, he gets very frustrated very quickly, but he can't really, he can't, beat down on Rand Paul or run the authority. Here's a persuasion thing. One thing that you want to do in terms of persuading somebody is establish authority. That's one of the reasons why doctors wear white coats. You always respect somebody who's wearing a white jacket. And they have the name doctor, and you establish authority, like you're the expert in the field. Fauci can't do that with Rand Paul. Rand Paul, went to Baylor for undergrad. He went to Duke Medical School, one of the top 10 medical schools in the country. And so when he talks with him about, even though virology and epidemics are not his specialty, he can read the literature, and he has colleagues with whom he can talk and with who he trusts, but he's also capable of thinking for himself in medical terms, and he knows what's happening and what's being said. So, like, for example, I think I mentioned in my live stream earlier this week, I spoke to Rand, and we talked about a number of things, but one was, if you already had COVID and you get the vaccine. I said to Rand, can't you get really sick if you do that? He says, you have 1,000 times more likely chance of getting really sick if you've already had a disease and then get the vaccine for that disease. And so Fauci telling people to get vaccines after they've been infected with COVID is really bad. By the way, I wonder why Donald Trump got the vaccine after he already had COVID. He got that back in December, never told anybody about it, and I still wonder why he did that. No one's asked him, and I have to tell you, if I had the opportunity, I would. In fact, I'm going to put it out there right now. I'm going to put it out on social media, and I know he's gone from a lot of social media, but maybe somebody has an answer to that question. So anyway, Fauci can bogart, and bamboozle Rand Paul like you might be able to do other members of the Senate committees, and so. People have been on Fauci for a long time, but I think they were a little premature in that. They happened to be right in the end. But I felt early on that Fauci was in a tricky position, specifically when it came down to the masks. Like, they didn't want people to go out and buy a bunch of masks, so they had to lie. I think there was other ways of doing that, but I at least can kind of understand that. But now Fauci is completely devolved into self-parody. He's a joke. This whole idea of having kids wear masks. Look at the science. Kids are not vectors for transmission. They have no threat of getting terribly ill. And this Fauci has kids wearing masks. He's saying that we might be done with masks next year. I mean, he's a joke. But the killer is, Rand questioned him, and also, by the way, every interaction that Rand Paul's had with Fauci, in the end, Rand has been right and Fauci has been wrong. And actually, Fauci has done a turnabout, a 100% turnaround, and effectively said that Rand Paul was right without giving Rand credit. So, like, for example, Fauci says that the NIH didn't fund gain of function experiments at the Wuhan virology lab. Well, he asked him, Fauci said, it's not true, it's 100% not true, and he did a little dance around the topic, but in the end, we found out that Rand was 100% right, that the NIH was, in fact, funding. gain of function, experiments in Wuhan. Oh, coincidentally, where the outbreak of COVID started. So, we need to get Fauci apparently, because one of the things I tweeted about was, is Fauci, should Fauci be tried for perjury? Well, as it turns out, at the hearings that he attended, he was not under oath. Well, here's the thing. Fauci funded the gain of function tests and experiments in Wuhan. He lied about it, and it had devastating consequences. Now Biden is so backed into a corner, even he has to admit that it probably needs to be looked into. So I think it's time that we put Fauci under oath and pin him down, because also there's another story that's been out there which is yet to be addressed, and that is that Fauci had a financial interest in some of this in some of the experiments that were going on with these viruses. So this could get really funny here, really ugly, specifically for Fauci, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I have found that once you reach a certain level of government, if you're in with the in crowd, with the people who control, the left, they control the mainstream media, they control the teachers unions. I mean, if you're in with that crowd, you're virtually untouchable. I mean, look at what we're seeing with Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has insider traded. I mean, it's clear as day that she's insider traded. They did it, over 10 years ago, with Visa, the Visa stock. They've done it since. But she's with the in crowd, so she's virtually untouchable. She plays her cards right, doesn't do too many crazy things in public. She gets a pass on stuff. So Fauci, I think, is going to be the same thing. But the only chance that we have of finding out what happened and pinning him down on his lies, his outright lies at this point, is by getting him under oath. They have to make that happen. The country needs to know what happened there and what role he played. And by the way, in the process, I think what we're going to find out is that we're going to find out something that Donald Trump started, which is to continue to expose just how much Chinese corruption has infiltrated this country. We see it on the academic level. We see it. I think we see it in the in the news, in the mainstream news. We have a Chinese doctor who is a lead spokesperson for medical issues on CNN. I don't know. Seems funny. But anyway, all right, moving on. Next topic, Florida. You can pull this article up. This is an interesting little thing. We've talked a little bit about this before in terms of other states, but Ron DeSantis, in an interview, said that the overwhelming number of people moving to Florida are registering as Republican, even those who were moving from states where they were registered Democrat, because they're beginning to see the light that Democrat rule is one of authoritarianism, and that their lives are so much better now that they've moved to a freer state. A couple of comments about this. I gotta say, I get the appeal. Like, I used to look down, think, I don't want to live in Florida. But, I've had recently, in particular, a lot of friends who've moved down to places I wouldn't have expected them people to move, like in the Orlando area. We have a lot of folks down there. And there are downsides, to Florida. I mean, we talk about having earthquakes here in California. I've been lucky. I've been here over 30 years. I haven't had a really big earthquake. Haven't seen one like the Northridge one. So like I said, I've been lucky. But they get those hurricanes down there, pretty frequently, every few years. And there's no part of the state where you're safe from it. But I can see the appeal, generally speaking, of moving down there. And also, I worry about the state because it's been pretty purpley, and when you think about it, DeSantis is riding high with big numbers right now. He's clearly a competent governor. It's a shame that you're only going to get him for 8 years, assuming he wins re-election, which I can imagine he wouldn't, and that he doesn't, and that he stays in and doesn't get elected president or vice president. They're lucky to have him, but they're super lucky to have him because he almost didn't win that election. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, he was in a primary to win. He had to win the Republican primary when he declared he wasn't the favorite. And then Trump got behind him, and then all of a sudden he became the favorite. And then he had to beat that Gillum guy, the former mayor of Tallahassee. And that was a really close election. I mean, DeSantis barely won, and he came on strong at the end to win. But stop for a second and imagine this. Imagine we're thinking, oh my God, Florida's doing so well. People are moving there. They've been off of masks and restrictions since last September. It's a wonderful place. So many people love living there. It can be super fun. But by the way, think about had Gillum won that race, what kind of face would we have for Florida? What would we think about Florida? Would it be this fun? Do you think they'd still be on lockdown? You can bet your ass they'd still be on lockdown in Florida. And it was a really close situation. And even though people are moving in and registering as Republicans are doing well at the moment, it's a pretty purple state. And so for those folks who are moving down there, I kind of feel for them because they're in a really tenuous spot. It could be, won by Democrats, and Democrats have a plan, a long-term plan, which has been pretty effective to target certain states and just cram their people in there, cram illegal immigrants in there, get them to vote. My guess is, I'm sorry to say this, I can't point to specific evidence, but my sense is that the Democrats are really good at cheating. It's a sort of a logical extension, this thought, based on how they govern. They don't govern based on principle. They govern based on getting power. And if that's your goal, then you'll do anything. The principles don't matter. Then you'll do anything to get the power. So do I think they're cheating? Frickin' A, yeah, I know they're cheating. I had prominent Democrats in this town tell me that the way that they cheated, in fact, this person lost an election, this person I'm thinking about lost an election and told me that in his election, the one that he lost, he was not part of the establishment. The establishment was fighting him. And he lost the election. And he said, you'll notice that there was unusual activity in mail-in ballots. I think they've got it down. I think they keep it super, under wraps. They don't reveal their secrets, but I think it happens. So I think about a place like Florida and say, hey, they're going to, how long is it going to be sort of slightly Republican, reddish purple? How long is it going to be that way? I don't know. You move. Anyway, here's the thing. I'll be down in Florida next month. I'm going to this this convention for the Republican Liberty Caucus, of which I am the vice chairman. This ticket sales have been outstanding. I think there's a combination of reasons for that. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I'll be down there next month. I'm going to spend a little extra time there, taking my daughter, and we're going to check out some places we haven't seen in Florida and see what we think about it. But I hope it continues to do well. I like Ron DeSantis. I know people who know him have nothing but the best things to say about him, as a person and as a competent person. So I hope it continues to do well, and we will keep you posted on our thoughts about Florida and the direction down there. It's a really critical place, really important state. Last but not least, this is sort of a small thing. I was at a couple of events yesterday. One was the kickoff of the recall of Chesa Boudin. And Chesa Boudin is the district attorney in San Francisco. And you say, oh, it's a San Francisco thing. It's not exactly just a San Francisco thing. In big cities around the country, we're seeing these Soros-backed district attorneys, Krasner in Philly, Fox in Chicago, Gascon in, Fox I think is St. Louis, Gascon in L.A., and these district attorneys are coming in and they're not enforcing the law. And they're creating a environment that's really great for criminals. And so there's a recall effort here. I was at that kickoff. There was one recall effort that started that's apparently still ongoing, but isn't doing terribly well. So a new one is started. That looked a lot more organized. Has a big threshold to actually make the recall happen. But what's important is that second group actually did some polling, and liberal San Francisco is pushing back on on soft on crime people. So even if this DA manages to survive the recall, I think his prospects for re-election are very, very slim. So I went to that. Then I went to a really tough thing to go to. There's a part of this town. It's strange because it's in a good geographic area. It's called the Tenderloin, and anybody who's been there knows it's a rough part of town. But what's weird is that it's close to, potentially really valuable. It's not too far from downtown. Parts of it actually are adjacent to downtown. In fact, Union Square, which prior to the pandemic had the highest retail rent rates in America, higher than Rodeo Drive. And if you've been to Union Square, you know what I'm talking about. It's a high-end place. Is walking distance to the Tenderloin, really close, 2 or 3 blocks away, and you'll go from Union Square, which is like I said, the most expensive. Where you have the gigantic Apple store, you'll have Gucci and Saks and all these high-end retail shops, Neiman Marcus, high-end stuff, to people sleeping in tents on the street, 3 blocks from Union Square. So there's, and not only are we encouraging it and creating policies that are turning San Francisco into a magnet for people who want to live that lifestyle, but families are coming in and searching for their loved ones who are caught up in those streets. And if you follow my Twitter account, I was down that way recently. Waze took me through there to get to where I was going, and you can't imagine. I can't imagine that Karachi has areas that are as bad as this. They probably do, but it's just so shocking to see it in a city that has more billionaires per capita than any other city on earth, and to see people live this way. So anyway, this mom came in, again, her son is homeless on the streets. I hate to use that term because it's not about homelessness, it's about drug addiction. My go-to line is that people who are not addicted to drugs are generally able to find their own housing, even in expensive markets like San Francisco. But this mom came in looking for her son, who is caught up in a death spiral of fentanyl addiction. And she said yesterday at this event, it was called stop fentanyl dealing. And she said in this event that she knows that her son, who she told me he takes precautions when he uses, but it's going to kill him. Fentanyl kills. It's going to happen sooner or later, and she can't really find him. He's just out in these streets, this section of San Francisco, using this deadly drug. It's an open air, drug market down there. And it puts me in a. So I went to that event yesterday, and it was really tough. In fact, it got tough before I even went, because I told my wife I was going to it, and she's like, "Oh my God, you can't tell me this stuff." I said, "Why?" She goes, "I'm a mom. I can only imagine." And then it kind of hit me, I'm, because I'm usually in political mode, and I'm just, going there to be supportive. Of course, I'm sensitive to this woman's plight. But then it got really personal. And when I spoke to this mom, I had to. She could tell. I had to fight my way through that conversation without I was choking up there. It was really, really tough, because she's a mom and she's looking for her son and her baby. She brought this life into the world, and it's tied into the recall to the district attorney and the backing of all the Soros DAs, because this one woman's plight of having a son lost in this trap, this labyrinth of fentanyl addiction, is what we can expect from the rest of America if we let the Soros DAs continue to be the supposed top law enforcement agents in our cities. This is what we're going to have, and it's shocking. I mean, it's shocking that we're letting this happen. I ran for supervisor in this town 3 years ago, and I said then, I mean, listen, we're moving in. This is going to get worse. It's not going to get better because we're not identifying the problem for what it really is. It's not a problem of homelessness. It's a problem of drug addiction. That's problem number one. Number two, we're not enforcing laws that drug addicts break. And here's where I get in kind of a weird position because, as you know, my libertarian side is like, I don't want to enforce drug prohibition. If people want to do these things, I suppose you should let them. But, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but I'm sorry. In the end, it's a matter of personal choice. You're not going to stop them from doing it anyway. And listen, we have maximum security prisons where we can't stop drugs from getting in. So drugs are going to get in the country, and people are going to use them. So what's the point? Arrest them for consuming something voluntarily? No, but you also can't allow people to live and do things on sidewalks that are against the law. It's not legal to use sidewalks as toilets. So what you can do is, while you can't, let's say you're not for arresting people for using drugs, what you can arrest them for are all the other things that they do to support that lifestyle, and use that, leverage those arrests to give them choices, to identify the problem, which is drug addiction, and to give them choices between care and treatment or jail. And it's funny, I was talking to a guy who spoke yesterday, a guy I've known for a little bit, who is becoming a well-known spokesperson for homeless and drug addicts in San Francisco, a guy who's living on the streets 3 years ago. He said, I was 1.5 blocks from where I'm standing right now. I slept on the streets 3 years ago today. And he had a family and kids and a wife, and he got in this spiral of drug addiction, and he lived on the streets for a long time. He's got scars all over him. He looks healthy now, but he had scars all over him from getting sepsis, from drug addiction. And he fought his way out, and he's got his family back. He's doing well now. He's working, but he's the poster child for saying you got to force these people into drug treatment. You can't let them hit rock bottom, because with drugs like fentanyl, rock bottom is death. And if they're violating the law while they're using drugs, you can't turn your head and look the other way, because that's not compassion. It is a death sentence, is what it is. So anyway, this is where we are in San Francisco. This is what's coming to a city near you. If you let people get elected to office who are supported by the likes of Soros, the part of this progressive DA movement, it's a disaster for cities everywhere. And we live with the consequences and the heartbreak, but we've got to push back on it. We got to end it, because they will destroy the country if they let criminals be the focus of the justice system. If excusing criminals is the focus of the justice system, then we are going to be the big losers. So anyway, I think that's about it today. Actually, I was going to do a little shorter show, but always find something to talk about. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. Please punch that subscribe button on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at RealJohnDennis, and also at Instagram at RealJohnDennis. Keep you updated on what's going on with the campaign. And if you punch that YouTube subscribe button, we release other content too that you get notified of when it's released. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. If I don't post anything between now and Monday, have a great weekend. Have a great Memorial Day. Hope you're spending it with those you love and doing things you love to do. And we will be back. I think we're going to pass on Monday. We'll be back on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.